listening to the Restaurant Incubator, the show for aspiring chefs and restaurant founders who want to launch smart, spend less, and open their doors with confidence. I'm your host, Brandon Sharp. Today's guest is a powerhouse example of doing just that. Launching smart, spending less, opening with confidence. And at just 26 years old, Gabe Barker opened Pizzeria Mercado in Carborough, North Carolina. It quickly became one of the most respected and sustainably run pizzerias in the whole country. Gabe didn't just inherit a culinary legacy from his parents. He built on it with intentionality, self-discipline, and a deep understanding of leadership and how to run a team. You'll see from the interview that he is a completely natural leader. It's really amazing. And also what a lean and thoughtful restaurant should look like. In this episode, we get into what is most important to him as a leader, how he set up his business for success from the very beginning, and also the tweaks and adjustments he made along the way when the freight train was already rolling along at 80 miles an hour. So Gabe's story is going to offer you a blueprint for how to open and stay open with clarity, agility, and purpose. So stick around. This one's full of sharp turns, real numbers, real lessons, and plenty of actionable advice and stories that you can use. Restaurant Incubator today with Chef Gabe Barker. Chef, tell us who you are. Tell us where you work.
Well, as Brandon said, my name is Gabe. I grew up in the area. Parents had a restaurant in Durham, North Carolina for a really long time. And we opened Pizzeria Mercado in 2016 and are coming up on our 10-year anniversary here this coming year.
That's right. Amazing.
Yeah.
So the way I understand it, you came back from San Francisco to open Mercado. You opened in 2016, as you said. So was your proof of concept based on the work that you did at Delfina Pizzeria, or did you test it in the local market as well before opening?
I think really for me, I had been in San Francisco for about 3.5 years at that point, and had helped a friend open a restaurant and kind of fizzled out in the leadership position that I was in there. And my dad said, hey, we don't know them personally, but we really think that the owners of Delfina Restaurant Group out there, Annie and Craig Stoll, run really great businesses, and we want you to go see them and see what they're about. And the location that I worked at, because at that point they had grown the company to a point where I think they had maybe 6 or 7 different businesses, was their original location, which had a casual fine dining Italian place, and right next to it was a hole-in-the-wall pizza spot. I mean, maybe 500 to 600 square feet total. I mean, it was teeny.
It's narrow.
And I just loved the pace. The volume of business was, obviously metropolitan, but in particularly there was very, very busy, but still the focus on seasonality, quality and commitment to product. They did a great job of culture building, and I just really fell in love with that. Having grown up in a fine dining restaurant as a child, and then spending some time in like a myriad of different kitchens in my couple of years before that in San Francisco.
Nice. So the way I understand it, you developed sort of a hybrid Neapolitan New York crust using a starter from Magnolia Grill. Is that right?
So when I took the recipe that I had kind of learned on when I was in San Francisco, but obviously wanting to make it my own, and we all take from previous experience in places that we've worked from. Anyone that believes that they haven't in the restaurant industry is just foolish,
Exactly.
But I think part of the beauty of cooking itself is taking something that you've learned and putting your own unique twist on it. And when we were testing the recipe, my mom had a sourdough starter that she kept that I think was 3 years older than me, so it'd be turning 40 this year. And we just used little bits of that when we built the first couple recipes. And now, very much like almost like Asian braising technique, we use old pizza dough. So there isn't an active sourdough starter currently in use every day at Mercado, but we have been using pizza dough for 9 years, 9+ years that we carry over.
Nice.
And it kind of, if anything, is just kind of like that extra flavor boost to kind of get us going every morning.
Yeah. And do you, depending on the season of the wheat or the ambient humidity, does that change from day to day? Is it super dynamic?
I think that's one of the parts about anytime you're baking, because I've always tried to describe, pizza, if you're really dedicated to it, is this real hybridization of cooking and baking at the same time. And so, yeah, starting water temperature matters drastically. Ambient temperature for proofing matters dramatically. I mean, there's factors that we kind of look at every single day to try and ensure that we're putting out the most consistent product that we can.
Okay. All right. And so you came from a restaurant family, but you have a history degree, right?
Yeah.
So when you were studying history, did you have a different career path in mind?
Yeah, I kind of have always been, I love reading and I love writing, and always wanted to soak things up, but wasn't scholastically the most inclined. You know, it was always too much unnecessary talking and stuff like the comments on all of my report cards, but got pretty good grades. You know, and I had a history teacher in high school that was super impactful on me, and he made it really fun to learn and made me kind of thirst for more of that knowledge, and so that was my original guide into that degree, and I was actually on pace to get my teaching licensure.
Okay.
And just from talking to a lot of my friends that were graduating in the same field, especially in North Carolina, unless you had an advanced degree at that point, or a decade worth of experience, getting yourself into a really good public school system was going to be a challenge, and therefore consequently your wages were really nominal. And so I just wasn't sure that was the right path for me. From talking to, I think I had 2 or 3 friends in particular that I think they're in their second or third year of teaching, and just talking to me about feeling under-resourced, having to deal with a lot of ESL, English Second Language children that they didn't have the ability to help, and feeling kind of lost. And so I said, well, geez, I don't know if that sounds like so much fun.
Right.
And having always worked front of the house, I mean, I started working for my parents, I think, when I was like 14 or 15. I used front of the house jobs to kind of support myself, but have always just loved food. I mean, it's the foundation of my familial structure, and just wanted to explore it. Told my parents, hey, I think I want to go to culinary school. They dissuaded me. Both being CIA grads, and they said, why don't you go work in a kitchen for a year that's not ours? My dad demanded that it was, not their kitchen, which I think was a really great suggestion, just because we're two very type A personalities, and I've always had a problem with authority, hence the desire to be my own boss, and so I was very fortunate that he got me connected with somebody he had known for a long time in San Francisco, and graciously, without having real line experience, gave me a garde manger position, but we had gone to the beach together with his family and things, and he knew that I was, a reasonably quality individual that had been raised correctly.
Right. You weren't on some last chance agreement getting
exactly.
Okay. Well, Mercado has such an incredible local loyal following. So what is the message that you and your GM give to the service team when it comes to nurturing those relationships?
It's really just a culture of taking care of people. Like I've said, so many of my formative memories were based around food and dining and travel. Granted, we would go travel. My parents were doing like cooking events at the height of their kind of culinary career. And so I was really lucky. I always tell people that I wasn't really spoiled in many ways, but I consider myself very spoiled in exposure.
Yeah.
And so I just really, grew to remember some of my greatest times being based around food and dining. I remember eating at Emeril's when I was 13 years old, and I can still tell you the double cut pork chop that I ate. I can still tell you that because we were in New Orleans, they allowed me to have wine at the table, and then my mom and I carried each other arm in arm over across the street to check out their wine cellar because my dad wanted us. Those are things to me that were extremely impactful, and I believe that sometimes it's lost that dining out in the U.S. is a luxury. We've kind of lost sight of that a little bit, and so I want to just make these experiences as impactful for people as possible, because there's food everywhere. And so I do believe that there are a lot of places that cook really great food, and sometimes the service doesn't help lift it up even further. Or I always describe to my staff that even if we make missteps, that service can be the thing that overcomes all of those missteps. And that sort of gracious, hospitable, patient. It all makes a difference because there are so many interactions that we have in our life on a day-to-day basis that whether or not they at baseline don't seem like service and hospitality interactions are. And I believe that our real dedication to, like, I always hate that, like when you're here, your family type of mentality, but that's kind of how I want it to feel. I want you to feel like you're invested in taking care of every person as you would if your parents were coming in and sit down and dine with.
Yeah, for sure. Well, coming from having worked in a couple of like temples of gastronomy where it was the food, and then going to a hotel setting and having to really admit that at least in a hotel setting and probably in most restaurant settings, the food is 49%ish or less, and the service is 51%. But that took me a long time to figure out.
And I hate to, this is in no way or shape or form to belittle places that aren't necessarily reaching, the culinary apex, but there are plenty of places that have very average food that are very successful because they've managed to create a culture or build a team, a management team that makes people feel wonderful to be there.
Yeah.
And those are the places that keep coming. My wife and I were recently on a vacation, and we had done a bunch of research and had gone out to eat for ourselves and had these wonderful experiences. And then the people that we were visiting took us out a couple times to some of their local favorites. And the places that we went to with them were like maybe not like blowing my socks off from a food perspective as a professional cook, but they were really well run establishments, and so the experience was great. And so like me being the hypercritical overanalyst that I can't help be when I go out to eat, noticed maybe the perceived value on the food wasn't quite what I expected or whatever it may be, but I walked out of there, we had a really great time because that person took great care of us. The little things were done properly, plates being cleared, table being landscaped properly, like the little things were all done very well. And so I kind of almost didn't think too much about the
you don't have to tease apart the food,
$45 fish and chip that I ate or whatever it was.
No kidding. Well, so in those early crowded days of Mercado, I mean, I know it's still crowded, but in those early ones, what systems did you find yourself having to change while you were already going full speed? I don't know, dough production or reservations versus walk-ins or staffing levels, operating hours?
Man, it's been, I feel like that restaurant for only coming up, 10 years is a long time. Anything, over a couple years in a restaurant is a long time. But we've made some pretty dramatic changes, and I think that complacency is one of the things that kills restaurants. Is systematic complacency. And so when we first opened, which are still by revenue our busiest months we've ever had, just because there was so much hype around my family choosing to open another business after being closed for a while. It was a constant learning process, and I was really fortunate that like my previous employer in California, again, it was just an established business. They were almost 15 years old at that point. Was really well systematically run. And so just the way they interacted with the POS, the way that the service team communicated with each other, the way that the kitchen communicated, the way they expedited food, it was all very, very dialed in. And I was hyper fixated on taking as much of that observation with me as possible and then figuring out how to turn that, because that establishment was maybe 22 seats and then we're 65 seats, so to transform that to a significantly larger place was definitely a challenge, but things were kind of constantly changing and still are. There are systems that I look at on a month-to-month basis and say, why does this snafu keep happening? What can we do better? And asking my general manager, asking my service team, asking my cooks, the people that are actually kind of in there dealing with it, necessarily not asking them for the answer, but at least to give their opinion, because that generally helps me guide my own thought process as to potential solutions for problems, but it's constantly evolving.
So as a leader, how do you combat complacency? Because you want your veterans to stay, you want them to earn more, you want to be able to pay them more, but you don't want them to get jaded. So that's, so Hawthorne Wood is 6 years old now, and I struggle with that a little bit because we have an amazing veteran crew. But being a veteran crew, they can get a little sarcastic, they can get a little jaded, and it's tough to jog them out of it.
It's the hardest part of I believe the restaurant industry overall in general. And this is like a correlation that I often talk to people about, and in particular non-industry people, to really help them wrap their mind around it. But I always say, trying to figure out how we take care of people in our business is the hardest part, because if I have a dental issue, I can't dentist myself. Or if I have a law, say I get a speeding ticket I need help with from an attorney, I can't represent myself. But because the average person can feed themselves, whether it's complete garbage or not, there's oftentimes a disassociation between the skill set that it takes for somebody to be a veteran server, or in particular my business, I have been very fortunate to retain a ton of my kitchen team. I have 4 or 5 employees that have been there since we opened.
Wow.
Which I believe is a testament to the culture of the restaurant and trying to take care of people and fostering and facilitating an environment that does everything in its power as a small business to try and take care of people. And I think that's the biggest thing for me, is continuing to try and figure out how to take care of my people, because I found that right before COVID, when we really were like a juggernaut, it was from retention, and retention was everything. And it made it so that I got to be more hands-off in the day-to-day, and know that the people that I did have in there were going to represent me to the best of my ability, because they could directly benefit from the overall success of the restaurant. And it's just something that I continue to try and put all my chips into, is how do I take care of my people.
Hey y'all, I hope you're picking up what Chef Gabe is putting down about being prepared when it comes to a business plan for your new restaurant. If you need a little help with the business side of things for your project, click the link in the show notes. I've built some digital tools that can help you out. Back to the show. Well, when it comes to, you mentioned, not being having to, I don't remember exactly how you phrase it, but not having to be there every single step of every single thing day to day. And when it comes to standards, you want those, you want your crew, your sous chef, your junior managers to be able to rise up. And how do you balance, like, what are you willing to give up when it comes to, accepting that they're never going to be quite at your level, at least when they start, but you need to be working on the business and not in the business sometimes? How do you maintain that balancing act? Because that's a tricky one.
That's been my biggest struggle, honestly. Okay. I've made a conscientious decision after COVID. It threw us all for a loop. A lot of us didn't make it through it, and I had some family stuff outside of work that just kind of forced me to want to reassess my approach to doing things, and setting realistic expectations, and having the expectation that I put on myself on every person else at my business is unrealistic and only going to create a situation where I'll probably be disappointed. And so right now, my main goal as we kind of like rebuild after COVID, especially from our management team perspective, is the first time I'd ever had kitchen management team turnover, is trying to continue to figure out how to teach and empower and guide their thought process to help them look at it like, here's the situation, what would you do? And see what their response is, and then say, well, yes, I agree for the X, Y, and Z. Like really trying to explain things. It's like, right, as kids, the biggest thing we hated is when you say, why can't I do that? And they said, because I said so. You know what I mean? And so it's okay to tell people no, but you got to give them like a valid reason as to why you don't think that they should be doing that, because we're not kids anymore. You know what I mean? And so I'm just working really hard on trying to give my team the tools they need to make the decisions that would best represent me, with the hope that the situation arises where they're making that decision without me around, a second, check for them that they do it, and they're wrong. In the same way that me as the owner, chef, and operator can be wrong often, and it's not necessarily being wrong is part of the deal, and it's about how you respond and, try and change things to make sure that maybe we don't repeat that same misstep moving forward.
Well, and I tell our team at every level, look, one in 1,000 times that you ask me why we do something a certain way, the answer will be because I said so, and that will usually just be a matter of urgency. Like it needs to happen now, no questions. But on the other half of that is if a new cook asks us why we make chicken stock this way or why we peel an onion this way, and we can't answer them simply and clearly, then we need to go back and look at our processes.
Yeah, I mean,
we don't understand them.
I believe that for what we can do, because consistency is the only thing that matters in what we do for a living, in my opinion, is creating a consistent experience. And I think that's one of the things that's lent Mercado to have the success that it has, is that people can walk in there and, again, mistakes happen. It's impossible. We're not going to be perfect all the time. That's just unrealistic. But we have created a really consistent, systematic experience. And I think that's what's kept us busy. It's what helped us survive COVID. It's what helped us come back from COVID in a way that's allowed us to transition to a 4-day work week, is by just providing an experience that people can depend on. Yeah. Right. And, from my experiences eating here in particular, that's one of the reasons why you're on my short list of places that I go out to eat at, is because I know that with the way that costs have gone, it's more expensive than ever to go out to eat. And I'm happy to do so, but as a really good cook, I don't want to go out and spend my money to be disappointed, And so I seek the places that, I'm always willing to try something new, but the places that I come back to are the ones that just consistently deliver for me.
Yeah, it's consistency, you hear it all the time, but I still think it's underrated because guests can have great meals in a place for 4 years and then have one bad experience and be like, well, it's going downhill.
And write you off totally.
And then you become this. Your restaurant can become a blind spot in their map of their places to go out to eat, and they might not think about you for 3 more years, and then it might be too late.
And at least for me, from my observation, because of the consistency with which guests attend Mercado. I mean, there are people that come to eat there. I saw one woman 3 times last week, and we're open 4 days, and she knows what things are supposed to taste like. You know what I mean? She knows what the salad dressing tastes like as well as the cook who's made the salad dressing in the afternoon, And so it's just really trying to, QC, quality control and everything is one of my go-tos. And, having worked growing up in a fine dining restaurant, working my introduction to restaurant life being more of a fine dining restaurant group that had a more casual place, but a lot of fine dining approach to systems. We don't have a formal tasting pre-service or anything like that, but if you see me throughout my day, I'm literally walking around with a handful of spoons. You know what I mean? And or people are finishing recipes, and I ask them to seek me out to try stuff, And again, it's about teaching more than it is me this is wrong, this is wrong. It's more taste it. What do you taste? Yeah. What do you think? What does it need? And that's something that I'm working really hard on right now, so that I can give them, again, it's giving them the tools they need to be successful without necessarily needing me to have to sit there and help them with it all the time. The goal is to get there where I can be like, okay, now, my newer person who I'm trying to work into a management role, I want you to be the person walking around tasting. You know what I mean? Especially as my wife and I are trying really hard to start a family, have our first kid right now. So
nice. Well, that I still get that from new cooks quite often. Is did you taste it? How does it taste? And they just blink at me because in their last jobs they haven't tasted the food. It hasn't been part of it. It's just crank out the recipe, pack it up, put it away, and move on to the next thing. It's what are we doing?
I've got a younger woman who started working with us probably about 4 months ago, and that's been. I know that I annoy her, but that's been the biggest training thing for me with her, because she's got great sense of urgency. She works organized. She's clean on her station, and then she'll finish stuff and she'll bring me the spoon, and I'm like, "What did you think?" And she's like, "Well, I haven't tasted it yet." And I'm like, "Well, why are you bringing me the spoon?"
Right. You taste it first. You tell me when you think it's perfect.
It's about exposure, right? And if you've never had that manager previously to stress the importance to you, and I try and explain this to all of my team, especially on the kitchen side, is we're professional cooks, right? This is what we walk in the door by choice and do every day. And so if it doesn't taste good to us, then how do you think the guest is going to receive it? And so I've just really helped a lot of people, and it's nice to watch. I mean, like we have a person who's doing our dough and pastry production, which is kind of a joint role at Mercado, and they had previous dough making experience, but this is their first baking position. And because Mercado is a scratch kitchen, they're learning an immense amount of technique, and there's like mistakes that are happening and things like that as we're learning, and I try and just really remind her to not get down on herself when mistakes, they're going to happen. You know what I mean? It's just inevitable. It's about trying to see, hey, what could we do better for the next time, and like taste it. What do you think happened? You know, why didn't this cookie turn out as nice as the other ones? Let's taste through it and see, and then walk through the procedure and see if maybe we missed something. Did we omit an ingredient? Did we overmix something? You know, it's kind of that back and forth collective pursuit of trying to improve versus me just pointing the finger and saying, hey, this is wrong, do it better, you know, which doesn't really get you anywhere.
No, that's not super helpful. Well, other than word of mouth, because I think that would be your answer, that would certainly be my answer, what have you found to be the most effective marketing channel? And at the same time, is there a type of marketing you think is overrated for restaurants or for your type of restaurant?
You know, this is probably, I'm a really poor person to answer this question because I wonder, looking back, if I was able to potentially push the profile of my business a lot more early on by, you know, paying or financially underwriting a bunch of advertising and marketing. I was very fortunate, I believe, because I always describe it as like this mix between, I know that we were doing something different for the area, and that's what originally led me to want to open Mercado where we are. It's a tough market, smaller, but at the time that we opened, there wasn't really the full service sit down fancy pizza, which is like kind of what I described that model as. And because of my parents, we got a lot of exposure at the beginning, and I felt very fortunate that my team was acknowledged from a bunch of different organizations and things like that. But I never paid for advertising or marketing because my parents said, oh, well, you don't need that. And I think it's just a reflection of the era that they operated their business in, where, you know, when they were running their restaurant in Durham, there weren't very many options for that style of food around here. And because they were so dedicated and talented, it just brought a lot of attention to them versus now where our food scene in this area has grown so dramatically in the last 15 years. There are so many more options of credible places that are out there doing really good food. I kind of feel like I've let myself down in some respects on maybe pushing the profile of the restaurant. But at the same time, because of my market and the location of Mercado, which is, you know, Carbro is like the very furthest little dot on the map before you leave the triangle.
Right.
And so and outside of maybe the Cat's Cradle or like a couple of events that happen on an annual basis in town, that's a commitment for somebody to commute to us from other areas versus when my parents were operating in Durham, you know, if you flew in from New York, San Francisco, or Chicago, and you said, hey, we want a really good restaurant to go eat at in the very early 90s,
you were going to,
that was it. You know what I mean? That was it.
Yeah.
And so, and I believe that marketing can be really useful, especially early on, you know, really to get your name out there. And then if you're consistently delivering, I believe word of mouth is, like you said, it's the best way to market your business. I'm super young but very old at the same time, and so I don't have a grasp on social media the way that I probably could, and I think that's one of the beauties of the internet now is that there's never been an easier time to self-monetize yourself or help yourself be discovered by using social media, and it's something that I just advocate if you've got the brain for it. I personally just don't like being on my phone like that. I guess maybe from being the last generation and grow up without them, I guess. You know? But I really do think it's an incredibly useful tool, and I watch tons of businesses that are all over the internet 'cause I watch them. That's like of all the social media, you know, doom scrolling that I do, a lot of it is food based, and so I see the same accounts of, the pizza place in Toronto or whatever it might be that's got, their little clip that they put out once a week or something like that. And so I think that can be incredibly useful from a discovery perspective.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember being highly resistant to Instagram, back as late as 2014, and an old chef buddy of mine saying, "Look, man, this is the best thing ever for food photography. Like, you have to, like, that's the reason to get on there."
And it's free advertising is free advertising, right? And
Yeah.
you can, depending on the scale, scope, and day-to-day operations of your business, you can have somebody on your team that you have manage that. You can pay. There are plenty of really good firms that can help facilitate that for you.
Mm-hmm.
I personally have chosen not to spend that annual investment, and therefore consequently think that we probably could be exposed to more people and potentially have grown our business by maybe investing in that. But at this point, I feel like our clientele is really established. We can always do more business, but at the same time, there are a lot of nights where we really can't, and I'm okay with that, because the burnout in this industry is so real. And it just goes back to employee retention, right? Do I want to have people work for me for 10 years and be happy to walk into work every day? Or do I want to grind a couple extra $1,000 out of them every year, doing as much volume of business as I can, and then spend a ton of money replacing them?
Right, stay open an hour later every night, see turnover increase by 200%.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And especially, and I know that you face this, and every other operator in the entire country faces this right now, but finding quality people post-COVID is just an immense struggle. It's not that they're not out there, but I feel like before, we'd put out an ad for a cook and get 15, 20 responses pretty much instantaneously, and maybe a third of those would be credible.
Right.
And now, I put an ad out for a cook, and I still get a bunch of responses, but the ones that are like, hey, we need to email that person back immediately and get them in here and for an interview, has definitely dwindled a little bit.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Well, when you think back about, I know it's been 10 years, but you think about the path or the transition moving from employee to owner, was there one aspect of it that surprised you the most or frustrated you the most?
Again, I think it's setting realistic expectations, and it's something that I've really tried to work on in the last couple of years, and expecting my employees to care about my business the same way that I care about my business is just not realistic, and will just set me up for disappointment.
That's a tough one.
And so in that respect, it's something that I've really worked on, because they shouldn't care about my business the way I care about my business. It's not theirs.
Right.
Yeah, I can do everything in my power, and we have profit sharing for salaried employees that have tenure at my business as an incentive. I think that's a really great way to keep them super invested.
For sure.
But again, that was the biggest transition for me, because when I worked for Annie and Craig Stoll in California, I was at that point I had been in the industry for almost 4.5 years, and I'm like, all right, now the only way I see myself continuing down this path is if I can be my own boss one day and be my own owner. Because it's just, I've always felt super privileged in my life and had opportunities that a lot of people never have, and therefore for a long time in my early 20s, the idea of not being successful in some shape, form, or capacity, regardless of whether it was, the best garbage man on the block or whatever it might be, I kind of put that expectation on myself. And so I've just really tried to learn that I can't expect that out of my people, and that transition, even though I did that for my old employers, I treated that, I looked at the COGS every day, I was really fortunate they had really awesome managerial meetings that had us go through P&Ls and things like that, and taught me the number side of the business, which I think is hyper valuable when it comes to your own management team. You don't necessarily have to give them everything, but how do they know how to make modifications if they're not sitting there looking at them, and you're helping grow their understanding of things? And that's been probably one of the hardest things for me. I think it's that, and the frustrations of suppliers and maintenance and repair people, and putting the quality expectations I put out as a business onto those people, that's a constant challenge. And I beat myself against the wall sometimes where, I call somebody because I've got a piece of refrigeration that's leaking or not holding temp, and they're like, oh, well, we won't be able to get out there for 3 to 4 weeks. And I'm like, what are we talking about here? You know what I mean, man? Or something doesn't show up on a delivery, and I call and I'm like, hey, where is this at? And they're like, well, it must have been a mispick. And I was like, well, you're gonna fix it? And they're like, I don't know if we'll be able to. And I'm like, oh, no, you gotta fix it. You know what I mean? It's not my mistake.
Right.
You just chose the wrong thing from the
It drives me crazy because I'm like, and I try to get across to them what you're telling me. Can you imagine if I went into our dining room and told a guest that? They would get up and leave and never come back. Are you?
Yeah.
No, an hour and a half ago, I got here. The U.S. Foods guy had made the delivery, dark drop, key drop, left the walk-in door propped open, using a full speed rack of desserts to prop the door open, and left. Just, yeah. So
it's just one of
my mind.
Again, there's just so many aspects of like, and maybe because I've never owned or operated another small business, but I just feel like restaurants in general, there's so many gears in motion at all times, that there's just, that's a huge transition that you, regardless of, I mean, man, the place that I worked at last in San Francisco just did insane revenue for the size of the business. I mean, if I remember it correctly, but I'm thinking like $3.5 to $4.5 million last year that I was
for that
there.
little for
for that
pizza,
teeny for that teeny little. I mean,
wild.
like nutso stuff. You know what I mean? And so I felt like I was like, I thought I was the man because I was helping the day to day and like really keeping that place operating. But then you step back and you start expanding your presence in the restaurant from a managerial perspective, and you realize how many things that, as like the sous chef, that you just don't ever have to touch or think about. And that is a dramatic transition.
Yeah, even if you are the executive chef, you might only see a third of everything. You don't see any of the HVAC it's
or
wild.
When something happens, you get to pass that off to the person above you. And then once you step into that ownership position, then you can again, and then this is something that I constantly am working on now, is just trying to help empower my team. Hey, this is a problem. Cool. This is the person to call. Here's our phone contact list of our plumber, our electrician. Here's the people that you can contact if we're having that issue, and I'm not immediately available. Or if the health inspector comes and I'm out of the building or something and they have a question, then here's a sheet where we have some of those answers. It's just trying to give them as many tools as possible to find solutions for themselves.
Well, it can be frustrating that you're the owner and you get everybody's worst problems, because if you have a good team, it's full of people who like to solve problems and like challenges, but there are going to be some that this is too much for me, this is too hard, or it's too awful, and so like you said, I'm passing this up. So as the owner, you end up with everybody's worst problems.
And I think that's just part of the deal, right? That's small business ownership 101. They can be some of the most rewarding businesses, both interpersonally and financially, and they can also be some of the most challenging, because there's so many jobs that you can have where once things, once the shit hits the fan enough, it's just no longer your problem. It just goes up somewhere and then it goes away.
No kidding. Well, when you think back to the formative stages of Mercado, business plan, lease, writing budgets, all those sorts of things, how did that all come together?
I was really fortunate in that my parents wanted to help me with that and work with me on it, as 30 plus year industry veterans, and again, so privilege in having somebody that knew the business and knew how plans should be written, because I had done a very amateur business plan based around my exposure in California. But working with them, I really got to see just how dialed in you should write your business plan in order to truly give, if you're seeking funding or just for your own personal approach to how this place is going to really live and breathe, you really do have to consider everything when you're writing that down. You know what I mean? down to, we looked at how much we were going to be spending on a month-to-month basis on like linen costs. I mean, just really trying to cost out everything we possibly could. And we got very lucky that our landlords worked with us a lot on writing our lease. They really wanted to have a long-term sustainable tenant in that building. And so when my parents came and said, hey, I think we'd be interested in renting the space, they were over the moon, and really worked with us and have worked. I mean, during COVID, they gave us a bunch of rent relief.
Great.
They've just been a wonderful partner from a landlord perspective. And so I think the business plan is one of the things that people really do not invest enough time into. They do not set themselves up to succeed by thinking about all of the things that you need to think about that can occur on a day.
They have an idea and they have a menu and then they're like, let's go. That's not enough.
And I mean, we had first 6 months operating cost estimated. We had labor costs estimated. We had build out costs estimated. We had menu costing. We did average guest count. We really tried to think of everything we possibly could so we could get like, this is what a week of revenue should look like versus labor. This is what a week of food costs should look like versus revenue. It was, for me, one of the most meaningful learning lessons. And, I'm not completely written off opening other businesses. I think it would take, at this point, for me personally, who's really trying to find balance, work-life balance at an earlier age than maybe my dad did. I'm working really hard to move to a place where if I'm choosing to open another business at this point in the restaurant industry, that I have like a really great partner that wants to do it with me, because I've reclaimed a lot of time post-COVID, and once you do that, it doesn't really go. It doesn't really go away.
No, I bet not. So on those, it's interesting and reassuring to hear you talk about the importance of getting those cost structures, especially, they're not going to come out exactly like you predicted them, but it's important to do that. So, and then those first 90 days of cash flow, is there any advice that you would have? I know you said that those are the busiest you've ever had those days, but is there any advice you would give to new restaurant openers for surviving that first quarter?
I think you always, to me, my biggest ones were payroll. And because we're a scratch kitchen, we carry a super high labor cost. Always have, honestly. Obviously, it's been more expensive to operate now from a labor perspective than ever, but I firmly believe that if there's any percentage point that I'm going to invest in, labor is the one. But that was the biggest thing, was in the first 90 days, I just wanted to make sure that we had, and actually I think we had 5 months in the bank was what our goal was. Was to have 5 months worth of payroll predominantly. We got very fortunate, like our lease negotiation, we have a really fair leasing agreement, and I felt really confident that revenue would cover cost of goods. And so that was the biggest thing, is like, as long as I can pay my people and not have to worry about them not showing up to work, I believe that we'll be able to figure the rest of it out. And realistically, our business has been very successful overall if you look at it on paper over 10 years, but it really took about 2 years for it to really snowball, to really start growing downhill. Nice. You know what I mean? It really did. Like I said, first 3 to 4 months, just absolute bananas all the time. We were open 6 days a week when we first opened, and by revenue, still the most highest revenue months that we've ever had in the history of the restaurant. And then it really kind of mellowed, because I don't know if that's the market that we're in or what it might be, but you're new and shiny. Everybody wants to check you out, and then people settle, and then they say, oh, well, the place is super busy, we can't get in, so we're not going to go.
Nobody goes there anymore.
Exactly. And then it really took into, because there'd be Tuesdays and Wednesday nights in the first year where like I question, I'm like, am I doing a good job?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, and it's not that. It's just the nature of restaurants, and so a lot of those asks from a financial perspective, I know, are huge. And I was fortunate that my investment was from a personal loan. And so we really costed everything out to a point that we knew that we had this many months in the gas tank opening up to kind of help as a buffer. And I think a lot of people do a huge disservice to themselves, assuming that, all right, you've gotten through the build out, you've gotten through the permitting, you've got your inventory in, and you're almost there at, you're ready to operate, you've gotten that, and they just assume they're going to open the door and it's going to be all hunky-dory, and then they just leave themselves drowning. You know what I mean? And I think that's the number one mistake that I've seen from small independents, that they just open the door assuming that they're just going to be, net cash flow, and it's oftentimes not the case.
Undercapitalization is that's a big stumbling block. I couldn't agree more. Well, wrapping up, last question. So how do you, what is your advice to first-time owners in that those tumultuous, those stressful first days, weeks, months, and years for self-care, mental stability, talking yourself down? You said, because I still go through those same moments of doubt too. That Tuesday, Wednesday night, what are we doing wrong? Do we need to? My temptation is always to say, let's change things right now, and that's seldom the answer. But looking inward, what are some of the techniques that you have to calm yourself down, reassure yourself, that sort of thing?
I think, it's hard for me at this point because we're established, and so and my perspective has changed a lot. I mean, I know you know this now because you're industry veteran, but once you've been in a position of ownership for a long time, you see the world a lot differently, just because you've faced so much adversity from being a small independent restaurant owner. And I just believe people should be very confident. If you've done all of your due diligence and you've built a really good business plan, you've tested your market, whether that's a pop-up or selling at the farmer's market, and whatever it might be, if the response from the public seems to be positive, then it's more or less just sticking the path. You know what I mean? And it takes arrogance to do what we do. You cannot be a small independent without being self-confident in your ability to do things. And I think sometimes, as even I did early on, you're doubting whether or not your food is good, or whatever, is our service not the style that people are looking for, or whatever it is. And I believe you kind of have to redirect that negativity towards being like, okay, how do we really hammer down systems? How do we really try and, especially empathetic service, giving your team as many tools and that's a lot of what we talk about at Lineup. My general manager, because I still take place in Lineup almost every single day there, my general manager will often talk about service points and walk through the drink menu and any changes there, and do wine tasting and things to educate the staff. And I'll often touch in on food changes and things like that, but I often talk about service points. And I do truly believe that moving forward, as costs continue to go up to us, and therefore consequently cost of going out to eat continues to go up to the guest, overall service experience is the make it or break it. If you have a wonderful service experience, the perceived value is there. I mean, I give you guys from a company a huge pat on the back, because that's what it feels like when I come in here, is that I'm being taken care of and that people are invested in me having a good time. And that just it really does, it lifts up the whole dining experience. And whether that's, I've always told myself moving forward that if I do decide to open another business, conceptually, that I'm going to go small. Less moving parts,
less variables,
less labor. Those are all things that, because I have, I think, 3 or 4 business plans that I've written for other concepts, and was in 2019 getting ready to buy a building and feeling very fortunate. Right. I know. And
been a tough time to be oh man,
it would have really bummed me out to have done a full build out and then just have COVID happen 3 months. And so many people had to deal with that, and I just got lucky that it wasn't me. But I've gone back and I've rewritten a lot of those business plans to be smaller square footage, maybe change from full service to counter service. Just give those business plans, if I choose to execute them, more of an opportunity to be successful. just because I just don't think the average dining public realizes what it takes to run a full service sit down restaurant. They just have no clue.
Yeah. So many. I haven't learned that lesson yet. So many moving parts, so many variables.
Yeah. So that's my biggest one, is just really kind of, take that step back, be self-confident in what you're doing. If you're passionate about it and you're investing the time, things grow, and just trying to give your team, like, that's another thing that I don't see enough in restaurants is positive affirmation. And if it takes nothing and it costs us nothing to tell people that they're doing a good job, or to say thank you and good night. And so many people just, and I get it, you're exhausted. I'm not doing it anymore, but I was working 110 hours a week before COVID and stuff like that, just burning myself out. But that's always, always, always been part of my ethos to how I operate around my employees, is positive affirmation. Because then when there needs to be constructive conversation or disciplinary action, they understand that it's coming from a good place, because most of the other time I'm trying to give them that reward for doing things the right way. And that's something that I just, like, even when times are tough, I remember some of those first services when we first opened, and we were just getting obliterated. And I was training people to work the pizza oven, which is like, at peak,
ton of nuance.
At peak business, we're doing 60 plus pizzas an hour.
Yeah.
So out of 2 ovens, and nice. And I just remember my dad, because we were throwing a lot of pizza away. And he's like, "What's wrong with that one? What's wrong with that one? What's wrong with that one?" And I was like, "It's not right, man. You know what I mean? And if we're gonna be the fancy pizza place that's charging that much more money because of the quality ingredient that we use, and the desire to pay people to the best of our ability, then it has to be right." And so that was demoralizing for that kid, because the first person that did that job, I think, was still in high school at the time.
Oh boy.
And I'm like, refire that, and he's like looking at me like a puppy that I just locked out of the house. And I'm like, it's okay, man, you're gonna get it, but we're gonna do things one way, and that's the right way. And so just really instilling that in people, even in the heat of the moment, it's a challenge, but you just have to figure out a way to do it.
Agreed. And if you can do it calmly, all the better. They'll stick around more.
And that's the other thing too, is that and I think I might have responded to something you had put on Instagram the other day about like being called chef, and that was like always, and granted, I know it's a case-by-case basis, and this is just my personal approach to it from having worked in some higher end kitchens, but I think everyone is chef. If you really want to have the most success, and granted, there's still traditional hierarchy in my kitchen. I have kitchen managers, I have front of the house managers. There is a definitive separation of role and responsibility, but from a respect perspective, that's everyone is chef, right? Like, my dishwasher is as valuable as my pizza guy who's been with me for 10 years from a day-to-day operations perspective. My sous chef who's been with me for 10 years is just as important as the prep guy who does all of our volume prep, and that sort of mentality has, I think, been really successful for me. It's just trying to extend that same level of respect, and I think it's part of the reason why a lot of people have left the industry. It's like, who wants to go to work, make $40,000 a year, and get yelled at while they're doing it?
Be mistreated.
Nobody. I don't want to do that. I had a couple of situations in my own culinary career coming up where, just because of the way that I was raised and things like that, I had to pull my managers aside and say, "Look, man, if I'm doing something wrong, we can talk about it, but like, you're not going to talk to me like that, like, I'm a grown man, you know what I mean? And you're not my father. So like, you don't get to yell and belittle me. You don't get to, try and take me down a peg and things like that. If I'm doing it wrong, that's fine, and we can fix it." But there was just, I think I had 2 or 3 situations where I had a sous chef or somebody like that really taken aback, because I was like, nah. It's like, I'll just leave, you know what I mean? I'm just not going to work in a place like this. And it's just the way that it used to be. It's just how it was. And I feel that some of that being tough on me helped thicken my skin and make me prepared to deal with adversity. But I feel like I can do the same thing by just having real conversations with people.
Yeah.
And we can be like,
more effectively.
Yeah, we need to sit down and talk about service last night when you get in the morning. You know what I mean? And it affords me an opportunity to make notes, to write it down, and to try and have a constructive conversation. And also give that employee the opportunity to come back to me and say, well, this is how I felt in the situation, and this is why, this is what happened. You know what I mean? So that we can hopefully find a more constructive path forward versus being like, you suck, you should, why are you even here?
You fucked up.
Yeah, exactly. Or having, the people that I used to have as I was like learning how to cook, just like tossing my meats in the trash instead of like saving it for staff meal. You know what I mean? Yeah. Something as simple as that, just to like prove a point to me that how garbage I was.
Yeah, what's the lesson being taught here?
There was no lesson other than I'm like, oh, you're an asshole.
Right.
You know what I mean? That was the lesson, is that you don't know how to effectively communicate because that's how you were brought up in the industry. You know what I mean? So I think not having that sort of environment is one of those other, and when people are first opening, it's so stressful. There's such an expectation, and you just have to find a way to kind of like zen out for a little bit, so that, because if they see the leader, everything's top down, right? If they see the leader walking in the door having the ability to push through adversity in a really graceful way, then it kind of gives them no excuse to do the same.
Right. So, but if they see me having a breakdown, then it creates more space for them to panic
and why should they not act that way if the people that are supposed to be leading them are doing the same thing?
Indeed. Chef, I really enjoyed this. Thanks so much for being here today.
It's great. I want so badly, and this is one of the things that people have asked me about the area where we live in, because I guess at almost 10 years old, my business is honestly like now kind of like in the medium age for the area that we live in. And they keep people, guests of mine, ask me about all the places that are opening and all these things, and we need as many good restaurants as we can get.
Yeah, we need more good restaurants and more good chefs here.
Because for every place, and this is nationally too, right? Because for every place that opens, 3 or 4 are closing, right? Yeah. Because the numbers just don't make sense anymore, or a lot of it's greedy landlords at this point that feel like they can just get everything they can out of a space. But I just want more and more of these really wonderful restaurants to exist, in my immediate vicinity for my own personal gain, but just overall, because I do believe that small restaurants, whether they're independents or part of a small restaurant group, they're really like the lifeblood of communities, right?
I totally agree. And so if, when somebody comes to visit or you move somewhere new, if that place has a great restaurant community, that's always on the podium of what people, it's always like, yeah, we have great parks, we have great restaurants, we have great whatever public transit, but if there's a great restaurant community, people are always hyping that up.
They're hyper foundational parts of our communities. And so I just really strongly, because of, and I think it ties back to like what I said very early on, where like you love that place that's in your community because you go there every year for your birthday or for your anniversary with your partner or whatever it might, and that's like part of why it holds that special place. And I talk to my staff a lot about like making that experience memorable because of how important those memories are to me personally from my own childhood. And like it's a powerful thing, right? They say that plenty of scientific study has shown that over the span of your lifetime, whether it be, financial stability or, there's multiplicity of factors that help define what is happiness, that, meaningful relationships are the number one thing that give you like consistent reward for your investment. And so I believe that restaurants are just such an easy opportunity to create experiences that make meaningful memories and that are based around being with people. And maybe it's from the family that I grew up in, but man, it's like I see families come in and when all 4 people are just like locked on a screen while they're out to eat, I'm just like, oh dude, like, we gotta do better. And so that's something, people have always been like, why don't you guys have TVs? And I was like, because I want you to talk to each other.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Same here.
I want you to hang out.
I don't want you sitting there staring up at the corner.
And so that's something that I just love restaurants for that. The ability to bring people together, to create and foster environments of celebration. I mean, they're just wonderful, wonderful things. And I hope that our average American can realize how much like you sacrifice from your family to do it, and how much those people that are in there cooking are sacrificing just to be there every day. I mean, it's a really special thing. So yeah, I haven't tired of it yet.
It's awesome, man. I can't improve on that. Thanks again.
Thank you. Appreciate you being here today. Awesome.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for tuning into the Restaurant Incubator. If you enjoyed today's show, please forward it to 2 friends who you think have a bright future in the restaurant industry. This show doesn't accept sponsors. We don't do paid advertising, so the only way that we grow is by you sharing it with other folks in the industry. Stay humble, stay hungry.